Hello YouTube, this is Jeff. Welcome to Page Layout with CSS. We can use CSS to change the visual presentation of elements in a web browser, and often those decisions are based on the sections that the copy belongs to. So in the example that I have here on screen, we have a generic page that has a main title or heading, some navigation items, a section for page copy, a section for a sidebar, and then a footer. So identifying these sections is the first step towards laying out your page with CSS. So let's look at the code that I have here in Dreamweaver. I have my index.html, which is contains the source code for the page the example page, and a basic CSS file, basic.css, with no instructions written yet. And the source code, these files are linked in the head. We have a link tag, and we use the 3 common attributes for linking a style sheet, which is href, rel, and type. What I've done here is, in addition to the basic elements for my content, I have included comments that identify these sections that I called out earlier. So we have the main heading, the primary navigation, the page copy section, the sidebar section, and the footer. It's pretty straightforward. But this is one of the reasons why the key is identifying what these sections are, where they begin and where they end. So we could create style rules that affect just these individual elements, but that solution doesn't usually scale for large websites or websites that are dynamic, that contain dynamic copy, especially things like member systems where users, end users, are going to actually be editing information on the page without using forms, but not editing the HTML itself. So what we do in this situation is we would mark up these sections or call out these sections with tags. And there are 2 tags that are commonly used for this, and that first one is div. So div does not have any visual appearance in HTML. If I take my h1 tag and I put the div tag, I nest it inside a div and save it, I can preview this, and I don't see any real big significant change to my layout or to my page. But what div does do is it is a block level element, and that's important to note because if I want to mark up these 3 words and I nest them inside a div, what will happen is it will start a new line for those 3 words. So that's not really feasible. We need a different technique for marking up inline copy. And the second tag that we use for this is span. So now I can save that, we can preview this result, and it should return back to normal. Again, div and span do not change the presentation elements themselves, but what they do is allow us to create sections in our document that can be that contain multiple elements, multiple words, and they can also contain attributes called ID or class. So we'll call this heading, and using this value we can write a style rule that will affect our attribute value rather than the specific elements that are contained inside. So this is an ID equals heading. So let's go over here to basic.css and we will write a rule. So we would identify that as pound heading. So when you're using an ID, you can reference it in CSS with this hashtag sign. Just to get started in this first video, I'm simply going to replace the background colors. So if we save this, we can preview the result, and here we go. We can see that the heading has been replaced with a yellow field as a background. That's just the first step towards creating our page layout. Now it may not seem practical at first to have this ID when we could just reference the H1 as a selector, but often headings contain multiple elements. They could contain text, images, forms like search bars, things like that. So let's add a subheading here, H2. There we go. So we'll have CSS page layout. And now you can see that both elements have the background color of yellow. So as simple as that seems, we just need to repeat that process here for our remaining sections. So we have the primary navigation. We'll wrap that or nest it inside a div tag and also give this an ID. And I will call this nav. Now I'll write the selector, which is pound nav, and we'll just give this a background color of red to identify it, and then preview the result. Here we go. Now we can see our next section. Now the other attribute that we can use instead of ID is class. So that if I take this page copy and I nest it in a div and give it, instead of an ID, I will give it a class and set its value to article. Okay, then I just simply need to close that div tag. This effectively works the same way as the ID for what we're doing in this example. It creates an attribute value that we can reference as a selector. So in basic.css, I will write the selector for my class, which is dot. Instead of the hashtag sign, we use dot article. And now we'll use the color green. Okay, so we'll save that and preview it. And what we should see now is our page copy section is highlighted in green. So that's worked. So the IDs and classes seem to work the same. The big difference between the two is that IDs can only be, the value for an ID can only be used once in HTML. The value for a class can be used multiple times. So every developer does this a little differently, but IDs can, because IDs can only be used once, they're somewhat limited in that sense, but on the other side of it, the value is you can link directly to an ID on a page. So if I have this navigation section here listed with an ID, and I have a lot of copy on my site, maybe I want to put links that say back to top, I can actually link to my navigation bar or to my heading. So that's the value of IDs. However, classes can be reused. So it's common to have classes that just reference small changes. So here I have these three words that I marked up with the span. So I'm going to use a class that's just called red. And if I go over to basic.css, I'll write a selector for red, and I will change the color of my type to red. So now I can just preview this, and I can see that those three words did show up as red. Now maybe there were some words in a different section or in a different within a different element that I wanted to change to red. So here I can take page copy and I can give it the class of red, and that will change those words in my heading here to red. Okay, so the final, I only have two more sections, which is the sidebar and the footer. So the last step is to mark up those two sections and give them background colors. We'll do that real quick. Sidebar, and for the footer we will give it an ID of footer. And go back to basic. We can write the class for sidebar, background color, and we will pick this light blue here. And the last one is footer. And remember, we used an ID for footer, so we use the hashtag. And we'll change the background color to, we'll use this purple here. Now let's save this and preview those results. Here we go. Now we can clearly see our sections. Now this may not seem too practical, creating this very colorful layout here, but this is the first step in creating a more complex layout template. Thank you for watching.